religious objections do not work here. No, you need to be vaccinated. Amish in their schools are in some sense generating a public health threat. Again, private Amish schools. Let's talk about the fines that these schools have faced. Hey guys, so we had some news earlier this month out of New York State where a federal court has upheld a decision requiring Amish school children to be vaccinated. And I'm not talking about Amish school children that are attending public schools. These are Amish school children that are attending their own private Amish community schoolhouses. The one-room schoolhouse that you think of when you think of the Amish. That's what we're talking about here. So what is going on here? How are they able to do this if this is a private Amish school? I'm also going to tell you about how much the Amish have been fined in this case, because the Amish have faced fines in several of their schools in New York. And this is a case that's affecting Amish all across New York. Okay, and by the way, guys, New York is the state with the 5th largest Amish population. It's got around 25,000 Amish people. So this isn't just something that affects a little minority of Amish in a state that doesn't have many of them. So religious objections do not work here, according to this federal appeals court. I'm going to explain what they said when the lawyers for the Amish tried to make that case. In a nutshell, here's the issue. In most states, the Amish are not required to vaccinate. There's a religious exemption for them. However, New York, along with 4 other states, does not fall into that category. The funny thing is, or the strange thing, or the sad thing, depending on your perspective, is that prior to 2019, Amish didn't have a problem with this in New York. They were allowed to use a religious exemption to not vaccinate their children in their schools. So this case was heard by this panel in November. Okay, the decision just came out. This is from Courthouse News. Quote, the case which the panel heard this past November had been brought by 3 Amish community schools that were fined in 2019 for failing to comply with state-mandated school vaccinations. The schools and Amish parents argued their First and 14th Amendment rights had been violated, as many Amish seek to live separately from the modern world and abhor vaccines. I think abhor is maybe a little bit of a strong word. A lot of Amish do vaccinate, but a lot of them don't. Okay, and there are different reasons for that. I did a video explaining some of that. The attorney for the Amish had previously argued, quote, the state has determined that it's okay to spare a child vaccination for the sake of their immune system, referring to medical exemptions, which is something that is allowed in New York still. But it's not okay to spare a child vaccination for the sake of their soul. So he's making, religious argument there. The plaintiff's attorney, Shannon Grammel, told the panel Monday. And that's the kind of value judgment the First Amendment does not allow. So did this appeals court accept that, like that argument, find validity in that argument? They did not. And I'll share with you what they said in a minute. Let's talk about the fines that these schools have faced for refusing vaccinations of their children. Again, private Amish schools. First of all, the Amish in New York, as I mentioned earlier, actually had a pretty good situation prior to 2019. Quote, New York had since 1966 allowed exemptions from mandatory school immunization for medical reasons or sincerely held religious objections. However, following a nationwide measles outbreak in 2018 and 2019, we got measles going on right now in parts of the U.S. The legislature removed those exemptions, joining 4 other states to prohibit any kind of non-medical exemption. Okay, so there's a public health argument or a public health stance. So since they were no longer permitted these exemptions, 3 Amish schools found themselves being heavily fined. I don't know why these 3 Amish schools, I don't know why these were fined, whereas others, these aren't the only Amish in the state that aren't vaccinating their children, that's for sure. In New York, you've got dozens, if not hundreds, of Amish schools. Quote, shortly after the new rule was passed, the Dygert Road School, Pleasant View School, and Shady Lane School were fined tens of thousands of dollars each for violating state law after they refused to comply with the law. The schools and several board members sued the state for an injunction. So here's an instance where the Amish actually did file a lawsuit. If you look at my video about the Amish that are rejecting the buggy light law in Ohio, there's another unusual case where the Amish have also sued. Amish typically don't sue, but in these cases where there is religious freedom involved or there's a major threat to their way of life, they sometimes do get involved in various ways in lawsuits, usually instigated by non-Amish people who want to help them. How much were these schools fined for this? They have a rubric or a formula to figure out how much you should be fined. To cut to the chase, quote, more specifically, the Commissioner of Health's order imposed a $52,000 fine against Dygert Road School, a $46,000 fine against Twin Mountains School, and a $20,000 fine against Shady Lane School. So Twin Mountains is a different school than the one that's named in the case. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but leaving that aside for a moment, all that adds up to a total of $118,000 in fines against these 3 Amish schools. By the way, what I just read to you was taken from the court ruling document, which I'll attach in the description. So apparently a judge had recommended that even though they calculated these fines, had recommended that the fines not be imposed, quote, due to a lack of adequate notice. But the New York State Department of Health rejected this recommendation, and they wanted to go ahead with the fines. So 6-figure fines for 3 Amish schools. Well, you can kind of see why they may be put into a position where they need to get involved in some kind of a lawsuit, even if that kind of goes against Amish ways. So the attorneys for the Amish attempted to use arguments that were used in the Wisconsin versus Yoder Supreme Court case. This is a famous case which essentially, it's from 1970s, which essentially enabled the Amish to limit their children's schooling to 8 grades, okay, on the basis of religious freedom. From the court ruling, it says the parents also argue the laws are unconstitutional because it impairs Amish parents' right to control the religious upbringing of their children as recognized in Wisconsin v. Yoder. This didn't fly with the appeals court. Quote, the court found the analogy to the Wisconsin v. Yoder case incongruous, noting New York's vaccine rule would not, quote, forcibly remove Amish children from their community at the expense of the Amish faith or the Amish way of life. And that was a kind of a core part of Wisconsin v. Yoder, because they were wanting to basically bus Amish from their little one-room schoolhouses to large consolidated public schools. That's where the analogy fails in this case, according to the appeals court. And part of the court's argument is that this religious exemption is in some sense too broad, at least compared to this medical exemption that New York State still provides. The court noted that medical exemptions are typically tailored to a specific immunization, while religious exemptions apply to all vaccines. Quote, the religious exemptions sweep had a far greater ability to undermine the state's interest in preventing the spread of disease. Further, allowing religious exemptions caused, quote, clusters of low vaccination rates and an inability to achieve herd immunity in certain communities. So from the perspective of the court, the state here, they're looking at it from the public health perspective that the Amish in their schools are, by being unvaccinated, they are in some sense generating a public health threat. Now, people are going to have different views on whether that threat, that danger, that perceived danger justifies requiring Amish school children to be vaccinated against the wishes of their parents, of their culture, of their church. Apparently there are, as you'd expect, there are appeals to this decision that are in the works already. I suspect this is not the end of the story. I mean, something like this could even go up to the level of the Supreme Court, as some Amish-related cases have, even fairly recently. But for now, the Amish have lost. The federal appeals court has said, no, you need to be vaccinated. You need to, even if you're in an Amish schoolhouse, your children need to be vaccinated, because that is a threat. That's a public health threat. And from what I can tell, these fines that the Amish have been required to pay are still out there. As far as I know, I don't think anything has actually been paid. So they're still kind of looming out there. This kind of has echoes of, if you watched my video on the 20-year Amish sewer battle case, which was actually just resolved recently as well, or mostly resolved. In that case, Amish, families had been fined up to $200,000 or over $200,000 for failure to connect to a municipal sewer, which would have required electricity to do so. This is another example of, I guess, a case like that where you've got strongly held Amish beliefs. Some may say the Amish are stubborn in some of those beliefs. Some may describe them as principled. What you describe them as, that's up to you. But those beliefs come up against requirements, legal mandates for the Amish to comply with rules of society of that particular state or jurisdiction. And, the Amish don't budge. And so, they end up racking up fines. In that sewer case, they actually had a school that was forcibly sold. And then sometimes it ends up in court cases like this one. And that's not what the Amish are seeking. But if the problem gets big enough, sometimes they do end up in court. And what will happen here, we don't know. I will keep you posted as things come out. Let me know what you think. Was the federal court's decision in the right here? I mean, are they doing the right thing, not just considering the Amish, but considering the general population of those communities in New York where Amish live? Or is this something that they're really going too far, considering that the Amish are not attending public schools, they're not attending schools with other non-Amish children? This is affecting their essentially private Amish community schools. Let me know what you think. Let me know in the comments. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. I appreciate you tuning into the channel. Hit like, subscribe if you haven't done that yet. And I look forward to talking to you again soon.